Have you ever procrastinated doing something? Would you go as far as to call yourself a procrastinator? That's what I want to talk about today because, truth be told, procrastination, not the enemy that we have been treating it as for all these years. The truth is, procrastination serves a very important, crucial, and positive purpose in our lives. And when you know what it is, that helps you to recognize it when it's happening and to turn it into the positive influence that it really is. And that can contribute to most of our lives in a really impactful way. So today I'm getting into the conversation around procrastination and how you can embrace it.
Everything is working out for me. It's working out for you, too. It just takes believing that it is. We can have, be, and do anything. The key is to care about how you feel and choose to feel good right now.
What is procrastination? Well, I didn't look up a definition like I normally do, but I think just as a general understanding, we all can relate with procrastination being something that we don't want to do. When we feel like procrastinating, it's like something is out there that we should be doing or we're supposed to be doing, right? We have some kind of obligation and we really don't want to do it. It doesn't feel good thinking about taking that action right now. Well, that's exactly what it is. And that's a really good thing when you know that that is the purpose that it's serving, is to communicate that to you. So why is it even on the radar? Why is this thing, this action that you feel obligated to take, why is it even present? Well, it comes down to three things: obligation, shoulds, and supposed tos. Obligations, shoulds, and supposed tos are not something that we are producing naturally. That's learned behavior. That's something that we have learned through this life experience, which has taught us that our action should be a certain way, even though right now we're not feeling like engaging in that action. So let's talk about where that stems from. Since it's not something that is occurring innately, it's not coming from within you. It's something that you have learned through the influence of someone else. Before I get into what procrastination is, I want to give a little bit of background into how I came up with this idea and why I'm talking about it now. This is one of those topics that's been in my queue for a while. I've had lots of notes that I have been writing on it, but I always felt a little procrastination when it came to sitting down and recording it. And since I understand the purpose that procrastination serves, that's why this episode has been sitting there waiting to be recorded for so long. Because I know that if you go and you jump in and do something that you feel like procrastinating on, it's not going to turn out the way you want it to. So as my notes sat there, and I occasionally would add something new to it, it was just kind of in the back of my mind that this was going to be the next episode I recorded when I felt the inspiration to do so. I haven't recorded a solo episode for weeks now. I've been waiting for the inspiration to hit. And it hit today because I just got off of another recording where I was a guest on someone else's podcast. And the topic that we focused on was procrastination. As I prepared for that interview, I was able to organize all of my thoughts. And I realized that in writing my notes for the interview, I had actually organized this episode. But the original inspiration for talking about this came from a conversation I was having with a very good friend of mine, somebody that I have known for a very long time, since sixth grade. And I was talking to her and she was just relaying some information about what's going on in her life. And she has a difficult, challenging relationship with her mother. And it's based on difficulties that she had in her childhood. And what she said to me was, I'm supposed to hate this woman in relationship to how she feels about her mother now, when considering everything she's been through in her childhood and how her mother had treated her. And in the moment that we were having the conversation, I thought, well, that's interesting. You are feeling some discord because you're not feeling hate for her, and yet you feel like that's how you should feel towards her. So I started thinking about, supposed to. Where does this supposed to come from? Where we feel like we are supposed to feel a certain way or supposed to do something. And that's when I realized that this is something that we learn through our lives. This is not something that is an innate occurrence. This isn't something that we are producing innately. This is not coming from within us. Therefore, it is not coming from alignment. It is something that is out of alignment whenever we feel like we are supposed to, blah, 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 fill in the blank. Another incident happened shortly after that conversation, which fell into this category as well, where I was talking to a friend and she was relaying to me that her daughter did not seem upset about the death of their dog. And I had already been thinking about this a little bit. And so I was able to recognize that this was a supposed to moment. Because when somebody dies that we love, how are we supposed to feel? We're supposed to be sad, or we're supposed to be upset or distraught, fill in the blank on all those things down on the lower part of the emotional guidance scale that we tend to relate to death. And since her daughter, who's young, 4 years old, did not respond in this way, it offered my friend a little bit of concern. My friend took notice of it. Like, oh, this is a strange way to respond when someone you love, even a pet, dies. Because she didn't seem upset at all. She was just going about her life. And I remember at the time telling my friend, well, she's still so young. And sadness about death is a learned behavior. That's something that we learn in our human experience. But when we come in as babies, we know different. We know that there is no death. So that's a whole other topic that I'm not going to get into right now. But that was my understanding in that moment. And I was able to verbalize, well, there's nothing wrong with her. There's no need for concern. She's not a serial killer. It's just that she hasn't learned that response. And this was probably the first time that she had, in this lifetime, been faced with death. And she was responding more from her alignment with her higher self, who knows that there is no death. Therefore, she was not responding in that way. It was very interesting. So, shoulds, supposed to's, I'm going to throw obligation in there. These are all things that relate with procrastination also. Because what is procrastination? I didn't look up a definition or anything like I usually do. But I think we all can agree that when we feel that sense of procrastination, it's because there's something that we don't want to do. And yet we feel like we should, or we're supposed to, we're obligated to do it. So why is this even on our radar? This thing that we don't want to do. Why is it there and taunting us? Well, it comes down to those three things that I mentioned: obligation, shoulds, and supposed to's. But how did they get there? They got there through someone else. And we learned that response. We learned that behavior. We learned that that is how we are interacting with whatever that action is that we don't feel like doing. And yet, now we have this discord because something was implanted in us, making us feel like we should be doing it, or we're supposed to be doing it, or we are obligated to do it. So why would somebody put that on us? Well, it comes down to a really selfish reason. And it's not malicious. People aren't walking around and throwing shoulds and supposed tos and obligations on people for the fun of it. It's happening because there's something that they want, and they are trying to get it through your behavior. Therefore, they throw this obligation onto you so that they can receive that which they are wanting. This comes from a variety of places. It could be parents, siblings, it could be teachers, law enforcement. I mean, anybody who is upholding some kind of rule, and they have established this rule, and now they are putting this rule onto you, that person is bestowing obligation on you. Of course, you have the choice to not receive it, but that's easier said than done because we learn these things when we're kids. That's when these things are really bestowed upon us. And what happens is we start to take it on and internalize it. And then we start self-pressuring. And that's when we really have a problem, because now we are pressuring ourselves to do things that we don't want to do based on this ghost of a person over here who so generously bestowed the obligation on us originally. But now that person doesn't even matter. Now you're just doing it because you feel the pressure to do it, because you are putting the pressure on yourself. Basically, when you feel an obligation to do anything, you've kind of given up your power and you've taken on someone else's rule. And you feel like you need to engage in this action. If you think about it, there are a lot of rules that we follow that are not rules that we set. These are rules that have been set by someone else, and yet we have accepted them as a rule for ourselves. That's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure to behave in a way that serves a lot of external forces, and it's disempowering because it has nothing to do with your inner guidance. The only way to really know what it is you should be doing is if it's inspiration. And the fact of the matter is, inspiration is the opposite of procrastination. There are two reasons why we engage in action ever. The first one is because it's something that we want to do and it feels good doing it. The second reason is because we want to avoid a negative consequence. Most times, that's the one that's motivating us, especially when it comes to obligations, shoulds, and supposed tos. We're thinking to ourselves, well, if I don't do this, I'm going to have to deal with this. And so that is the motivation that gets us to engage in that action so that we don't have to deal with whatever negative consequence comes from us not taking that action. I used to procrastinate quite a bit. I used to procrastinate my schoolwork quite a bit. I was kind of the doing things the night before they were due kind of kid, which is a little surprising because if you know me and you know my educational history, I graduated college with honors. I graduated my doctorate program with, I think, a 3.7 GPA. I mean, I am a devout student. This is something that I have defined myself as, that I am good at school, but it wasn't always that way. When I was in grade school and I had an essay due, I would procrastinate the heck out of that essay. I did not want to sit down and write it. And I didn't find the motivation to do it until it was the night before. And I was considering the negative consequences for the next day if I didn't turn it in. And that's usually what got me going with sitting down to write the essay. But I had to push through that feeling of procrastination. Thankfully, often I would sit down and start the writing process, and then I would get into it. And then I would really enjoy the writing once it got flowing. And writing is something that has always come easily to me. It's something that I enjoy doing. It's just that most times you're writing essays on things you don't really care about. And I think that was more the procrastination rather than the actual writing process. But if I was able to get into that mode, into that good feeling place when writing the essay, then I always had really positive outcomes. I would get good grades on it. And I would get a lot of compliments about my writing style because I was able to build up some positive momentum in the process. Then I had a positive outcome.
Would you like to have an ad-free experience? I know you probably have my intro and my outro memorized by now, and maybe you just kind of want to cut out that ad space, this one right now that you're listening to, so that you can just get all of the content of the episode. Well, if that does sound like something that you're interested in, I've put together a Patreon account, and I'm offering all of the episodes I've recorded so far without that extra stuff, so you just get the content. And I'm also going to be offering members early access to the newly released episodes. So I'll be putting those on Patreon several days before the episode releases on all the other podcast platforms. So you'll be able to listen before everybody else. You can find the link to the Patreon in the show notes. And I'm also going to post on social media, so you should be able to find it on all of my pages there as well. I look forward to getting to know all of you guys better and engaging in some co-creating together. For now, I'll just get back to the episode. See you on Patreon.
So let's talk about the opposite of procrastination, which is inspiration. What happens when you feel inspired? You feel an overwhelming urge to take action. You get this really good idea and you're like, oh, okay, this is an amazing idea. Now I want to go and take some action on this. And that feels really good. And when you engage in the action, it's easy and enjoyable. The way inspiration comes about is because your energy is lined up for that action. And that's why procrastination occurs, because the energy is not lined up. Everything comes down to a vibrational explanation. So when procrastination hits, that simply means that you are feeling like you need to take action before you're ready to take action. Procrastination is something that should never be fought against. And often we refer to it in that way, don't we? We're like, how to fight procrastination, how to get through it, how to get over it, how to stop procrastinating. But really, that mindset is just adding more resistance to something that already has a lot of resistance. And that's not going to serve you ever. You always want downstream movement, not upstream. But for the sake of the conversation, let's just say that you decide to fight through your procrastination and take the action that you feel like you need to, even though you really, really don't want to. What ends up happening when you do that? Well, it feels like struggle. It feels really difficult. It's uncomfortable. It's frustrating. It feels like fatigue. It feels like efforting. It feels like negative, negative, negative. Fill in the blank. Put your negative feeling in there. Because every time you try to fight through procrastination, it feels daunting. The end result of that task that you've taken action on now as you've fought through your procrastination is not going to be a satisfying result, because everything is vibrational, and your vibrational offering as you're fighting through your procrastination is not a positive one. And you're going to find that you're going to struggle through the task, and you're not going to be satisfied when you get to the end of the task. You might find some relief just because the task is done, and that was the goal. But ultimately, it's not going to be the positive experience it could be if you were doing things a little bit differently when you recognize procrastination happening. There's also a really strong relationship element with this. Let's just talk about obligation. There's a lot of obligation when it comes to other people in our lives. And a lot of times we feel like procrastinating those things that are for someone else. It could be a little thing like getting up to get your kid a snack. That's definitely something that I can relate to. Or it could be something big, like helping somebody move. If something like that happens and you have somebody you care about, who has asked you to perform some kind of action for them, and you really don't want to do it, what ends up happening? Well, you go into it with a vibrational offering of negativity. You really don't want to be doing it, so you're not feeling good. And even though the act you are performing, you feel like is serving that person, the truth is the vibrational offering that you are emitting is canceling all of that out, because everything in this universe is vibrational, and your vibrational offering has more of an impact than the action you're taking. In that way, you could actually be damaging those relationships if you are acting out of obligation and not out of desire. Because the truth is, you really do want to help these people, right? These are people in your life that you care about, and you do want to help them. The chances are you're feeling that procrastination because your energy's not lined up with that action yet. And that's what needs to happen first. Then you take the action, and it can be a positive thing. But this doesn't even have to be an interaction like this to have an impact on relationships. For instance, when I'm at home with my kids, just me and them, my husband's not even home, and I'm feeling a strong sense of obligation, and like I really want to procrastinate doing these things for my kids, whatever it might be, and it's a lot of things. I feel like I'm always up and down serving them in some way. I start to feel resentment toward my husband, who isn't even present. He's not even there. And here I am trying to blame him because I'm thinking he's not even here right now. He doesn't even have to deal with this right now. Why is this all on me? And those kind of thoughts, if they get momentum going, turn into a bigger problem, to where my husband can now come home and he's happy to see all of us. And how do I feel? I don't want to see him. I'm upset. I'm upset that I've had to do all these other things and he wasn't able to take any of it off my plate because he wasn't here. It's really not fair, and it's not his fault. And it's something that has to do with how I am responding to the obligation in my life. I'm not lining up my energy before I take action on something. And therefore, I'm entering into that negative zone, and it's resulting in negative outcomes. So what do you do when procrastination hits? First and foremost, recognizing it and knowing that it's a good thing. This is communication from your higher self telling you something about your energy. This is wisdom. This is not a foe. This is your friend. 2, you understand what it means. It means your energy is not lined up, and that means that's the first thing you have to address. 3rd, you embrace it. Do not fight against it. Allow yourself the kindness to do something that feels good. Taking that action doesn't feel good, so don't do that right now. As a general rule, feel good first, then engage in the action. If you don't feel good, don't bother engaging in the action. And I mean that. And that can be really hard to accept because you're thinking, I can't do that. I have to take care of these things. Well, you can. You can go ahead and do those things. But if your energy is not lined up with it, it's going to be a negative experience. You're going to be emitting toxic vibrations into your environment and all the people around you. Or you can try to do something that does feel good. Turn your energy around and then try to go do that thing, whatever it might be. The dishes, getting your kid a snack, making dinner, going to work. There's a lot of obligations, supposed tos, and shoulds that we have in our lives. And I'm not saying to ignore them. That's impossible. But it is possible to first tend to your vibration and your energy and move it into a positive direction before you go ahead and take action. That's one way to deal with it, because there are going to be some times where there's things that have to be done today. You can't sleep on it and deal with it tomorrow. So the best thing you can do in those situations is to first feel good in whatever way possible, and then take a stab at taking the action. The other thing is, if it's something that you can put off and you can allow yourself the freedom to do so, then just let it go. Let go of the obligation to take care of it and wait for the inspired action to come. Because if it's something you really do want to get done, that will come. The inspiration will come, and you'll know it when it does. In closing, I feel like I have to speak to a very human aspect of our mentality. And it has to do with why we engage in action at all. At the very foundational element of action is a very strong misconception. In fact, it's the biggest misconception about human worthiness. As humans, we feel like our worth is measured through our action, but that isn't the case at all. Worthiness is yours and it's mine. We are all worthy. It's given. It's not something that can be taken away from you, and it's not something earned. You have it. You are worthy. That feeling of worthiness being measured through action is strictly human influence. And it stems from people projecting their desires onto other people and obligating them to take action, to do things. And the reason they want you to do that is so that they can feel better in some way. That is why this is a learned behavior. We learn at a very young age that our self-worth is measured through our action. And if I could change that one aspect of our human influence on the young generation, that would be it. I would let them know that that's not the case. Before we came into this physical body to have this physical experience, we never intended to create through action. We intended to create through our vibrational offering. And that's why this is the biggest human misconception about worthiness that there is. This is widespread. This is something that people may not even be aware of, but it's something present. Because we're always defining ourselves by what we do, by the action that we take. And in that way, we are arguing for our self-worth. On top of that, so many of us are motivated by the desire to not deal with the negative consequence should we not engage in the action, that we are exhausted. We're worn out because it's not inspired action. It's not coming from a place of alignment. It doesn't feel good. A lot of our actions don't feel good. And then we're tired, we're worn out. We continue to take action on things we really feel procrastination about. And now we're emitting those toxic vibrations, which puts out into the universe a signal to send us more back, because law of attraction gives you what you feel. And thus the cycle continues. And this is the root of the lack of satisfaction that people feel in life. If there is any supposed to present in life that I can get on board with, it's that life is supposed to feel good. It is supposed to be satisfying. And it's supposed to be a deliberate act. It's something that you are creating, whether you are trying to or not. But the satisfaction comes when you are doing it on purpose. So, when procrastination hits, realize why it's there. Don't fight it. Embrace it. Find a way to be kind to yourself. Do something that feels good. It really is as simple as that.
If you're enjoying the podcast, you can show your support by leaving a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. You also can follow Dr. Williams' podcast on all social media platforms and subscribe on YouTube, and by going to www.drwilliamspodcast.com. Deliberate creation is the key to living life satisfied, and that is my wish for all of you.